Was sitting in front of my computer this past week and tuning into the next little bit in terms of a share with you, a Sunday message. And to be real honest with you, I was sitting there just feeling kind of dry, and nothing was really coming. And when that happens, there's always kind of a default position that I go to, which is, well, let's get back to some basic unity principles. And then I said, no, there's something else that's going on. So I decided to go over and sit in my chair, in my meditation chair. And as I was getting up, I looked over at my altar, because I have an altar in my bedroom or in my office. And I'm a strong advocate of having an altar in your home. In our home, it's a focus that we can have for our spiritual life, spiritual energy. And on my altar, there are a number of articles that I've had for years and years. And there's also 4 pictures, renditions of great beings that remind me of a non-fictional way of life. And last week we talked about that, non-fiction versus fiction. Fiction being that which we have made up in our minds about who we are and what life's about. And a non-fictional approach is that which is what is actually going on. What is actually what we are as spiritual beings having a human experience. And I would like to share with you just briefly some feelings and thoughts about those pictures that I have. One is Mother Mary. Mother Mary, who on the back of the card it says, Mother Mary, who volunteered before her birth to bring Jesus into the world. Mother Mary, a beautiful power ascended master of great love, wisdom, and compassion. The next picture is of a great Eastern avatar named Babaji, who brought forth Kriya Yoga through the line of Eastern masters, Sri Yukteswar, Paramahansa Yogananda. He is said to still be alive in the Himalayan mountains, said to be over 300 years old. And he holds a space of energy and power and presence for the whole planet. You could say, well, that sounds like a fiction to me, but I don't think so. The next one is Krishna, who was said to live 5,000 years ago, who was a progenitor of Hinduism, a great faith tradition on the planet. And the next one is of a rendition of another great being known as King of Righteousness, Melchizedek, who lived many thousands of years ago, who was a great high priest in the area of Jerusalem. And interestingly enough, for me at least, was particularly drawn to his rendition when I just got up from my chair and wanted to walk over and sit down in prayer. And I thought to myself, well, should I talk about these things with people on Sunday? Because in a way, there are many, many levels of consciousness within the room. And in the unity faith tradition, there is an emphasis on practicality. But I want to say that Melchizedek was a great high priest of alchemy and sacred ritual. And that in a way, we are engaged in that here. And if you're new to this type of teaching, I invite you not to close down because you might think that that's too weird. But to stay open. Keep your heart open. Feel the thought vibration behind the words. Because when we're talking about the word alchemy, using the word alchemy, it is a process of moving from one state to another. Behind chemistry, behind all of that was alchemy before it. A change of base metal into gold is a metaphor for us moving from the base elements of consciousness into the gold of truth of who we are. That's my intention for this work. Always has been and always will be, and over time becomes more clarified in terms of doing and being involved in this with you. Melchizedek's intention: he serves as a divine guide. He gifts humankind with freedom and forgiveness and creativity. He's mentioned in the book of Genesis. Charles Fillmore has comments on him, which I will relate in just a little while. But I struggled with this past week because I want to be inclusive with everybody in the room. Like I said, there's multiple levels of consciousness in the room. Some people are just newly into what we call new thought or deeper spirituality. And then other people have been on this path for many, many years. But as I have said before, this is a conversation on a soul level. I'm not here to entertain, even though it may be entertaining, through the music or through some humor or whatever. It is my charge on a soul level to minister to you and with you for the highest good of your life. Very important to me. Another thing that came through me was this past week as I was drawn to this video by a chemist named Dr. Rupert Sheldrake. Some of you may have seen some of his videos on YouTube. He's a biochemist, and he was talking about the dogma of science. And I want to link these two together because spirituality and science. Because we live within a worldview, a cultural and intellectual container of two things, basically. Our concept of God, which Charles Fillmore, the co-founder of the Unity Movement, said is the single most important factor of our lives. Our concept of the divine and of being within a culture of science, that everything that touches our experience is as a result of science, from the lighting to being able to speak with a microphone, to how you got here today. Everything in our lives is a result of scientific discovery. Everything. The clothes that we're wearing, the measurements of this room, all evolved out of scientific discovery. And the reason why I'm even bringing it up is because Dr. Sheldrake was talking about the dogma of science, that in the 17th century, the roots of the scientific method started to really come forth. Mostly out of an urge through quelling superstition. But pre-17th century, there was a dynamic understanding that the natural world was divine, that God's Spirit moved and lived within nature, moved and lived within people. And people made up stories about it, some that served and some that did not. But that those initial scientists wanted to let go of the superstition, so they relegated, or they created a split, a duality of the divine and nature. And that's what I want to address with you today. The fruits of the scientific method of discovery are all around us and highly beneficial in the realm of medicine and transportation, communication, all of that. No disputes with that. But what has created a split or a duality within this life? And I see it all the time. The split within even body, mind, and spirit. People not thinking that thinking has something to do with their own health, or not thinking that the divine is present within our own lives. And I just wanted to write or share with you some of the notes. Downgrading nature so that they could upgrade God. And there's intention behind that, because a lot of these individuals that were part of the scientific research were, as Dr. Sheldrake said, devout Christians. But they had a dualistic view of nature. And what's been going on in the last 50 years is this intention to get back to nature, get back to an original way of being, a swinging back of the pendulum into a way of being that includes the divine. And that the whole bringing Melchizedek back into the equation, that through this inquiry of ritual and attention to the divine, that we somehow bring back into balance science and spirituality. That this work, Charles Fillmore said, we must be spiritual scientists to bring it back into an alignment. That somehow this, for the last 300 years, there has been this process, perhaps in divine order, to let go of the superstitions around nature having power over us, but now to come back into a place of union with and recognizing that the divine lives within all things. The stars. Before the 17th century, people used to think that the stars were alive, that the sun and the moon and the ocean and that nature spoke to them. And you see vestiges of this still. People that are engaged with different modalities of healing. There is a dialogue with nature, with life. That God isn't off the planet somewhere looking at us and judging us. That's a totally erroneous belief. That the presence and power of God is here and now, even in this room, right now. And what keeps us from that is our own enculturation from the realms of religion and science that have served on many levels, but on other levels have not. So we have to question those authorities. I do. To see the good in them and not make them wrong, but to bring it all full circle. You'll notice perhaps that the indigenous peoples of the world never lost that connection. First Nation people or people in the Amazon or whatever, indigenous peoples, they never lost that connection. And we've grown to honor them more and more in the last 50 years, where there was a total disconnect before. But all this leads back to more of a connection with the golden world. It's interesting that the lighting in here right now is nice and gold. Robert A. Johnson, a Jungian analyst who I love very much, I love his work, talked about having an experience with the golden world. And this is what I'm speaking of, to heal this separation between spirituality and science. He was in India, in New Delhi, on the 10th floor of a hotel room. Prior to that, when he was 10 years old, he had a near-death experience of the golden world. And he was in his earlier mid-50s in 1968 when he went to New Delhi. He'd been traveling 20 hours on the flight and he was just exhausted. And he got into his room on the 10th floor. It was 6 a.m., golden light coming through the windows. He opened up his curtains and he saw a picture before him of old India, old New Delhi. Minarets, mosques, temples, and he had a golden world experience that, he said, it just floored him. An experience of such magnitude of God's presence that it just blew him away. And this is what is available to us now. If we continue with the work of this transformation, of allowing it to have its way with us. A lot of the times we're in resistance to it, though, aren't we? We want to resist our light and our expansion. Maybe I'm the only one, I don't know. But it's kind of like the mind goes, well, what will I be? Who will I be if I allow this to happen more fully? Will my friends still love me? Will I still fit in? Will I still fit into the social circles and still be cared about? Or will I just think that they will just think that I'm really strange? Well, we have to weigh what it is that is important to us. My experience is that we are yearning on a deep level for this soul experience. That the soullessness of the scientific world that has so impacted us has also created a soullessness in society, that people are taking more antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication than ever before, that we are on the brink of a possible another conflict in the world with North Korea. And it's all because of a belief of the mind and a separation and a split between fiction and nonfiction. And who is it really that we are? It's time for healing this division. Charles Fillmore says of Melchizedek that Melchizedek metaphysically really refers to the Christ mind or superconsciousness within us. That this means that which rules in man's consciousness is able to establish and maintain right doing, adjustment, and peace. It means the indwelling foundation of peace within us. And it's interesting, when I was looking at the word Jerusalem has been a place on the planet where people have lived for 5,000 years. It used to be known as a place called Salem. That's when Melchizedek was a high priest there. 5,000 years. It was a Canaanite settlement before the Hebrew people ever came. And it means, Jeru means foundation. Salem means peace. Foundation of peace. And isn't this what we're wanting so much now? A foundation of peace within. Because it's really kind of out of balance. We have this scientific method and we can make all kinds of things and destroy the world quicker than we could 100 years ago. But is that really what we want? No, we do not. I don't. To bring this home in terms of my own experience and to make it practical, I was out in Langley last week. My wife was still in Kansas City, and I was in Langley, and I was shopping, food shopping. And I was in this place in my consciousness, and I was just kind of having a grumpy day. You ever had a grumpy day? Of course you have, right? But I was having a grumpy day, and I was walking around the aisles of this market, and I was just kind of feeling like a stranger in a strange land. And I said, Bruce, do you really want to feel this way? Or do you want to shift this energy? And I said, I want to shift this energy. So instead of saying to myself, well, I guess I'm just having a bad day, I tuned in to the foundation of peace within myself. And within less than 2 minutes, through the continual giving attention to the foundation of peace within me, the energy shifted. And I started to feel better. And I started to see people in a different way. I started to extend love instead of thinking that I was a stranger in a strange land. And that's really what is required of us when we feel cut off. Because in a large sense, the worldview that has promoted a sense of separation, of nature being an unconscious field of life and God being somewhere else. Instead, bringing the divine into every moment of every day, that the two shall become one. God is present. This is what I kept saying to myself in the grocery store. God is present. The rest is an illusion. It's not true. And the energy started to shift. It's as simple as that. If you can take anything away from today, remember God is present in everything that you do. And your life will improve, because it's like a basic mind science principle. What we give our attention to grows. It's very simple. I wrote down here in my last concluding sentiments. And you can take this or leave it. It's up to you. Obviously, it's always your choice what you choose to hold as true for your own being. You are the son and daughter of a living God. It animates you, heals you, provides for you. That Krishna, Jesus, Mary, Melchizedek, they are all symbols of you. You are it. Tag, you're it. And this is, in my consciousness, the healing of everything. If you claim this, your world, there is no split, there is no duality, there is no outer effort that we have to take. You come back into center where science and spirituality are one. Because there is no separation when we're living from that place. So tag, you're it. Thank you.